It is episode 123, that's 123 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. Last week, it was, drumroll please, 31 hours of Fox News. Do not do that to yourself. It is torture. I also picked up 21 hours of PBS, that's the 5 I normally do, and then all of their RNC coverage, so it was 52 hours of media that I had to go through. And that was following the week prior where somebody tried to kill Donald J. Trump, and I picked up 8 extra hours on the Sunday before that. It's just been rough. I'm tired. I'm tired. So let's get into it before I complain about how tired I am, because I am. It's woo! That was not, ow. Luckily, those only happen every 4 years, because I couldn't handle that if it happened every year. Couldn't do it. Okay, let's get into it. The headline's really easy this week. Fox News, the Republican National Convention. And let's start with everybody's favorite. She's back from maternity leave, Jessica Tarlov, describing at length Trump's glorious speech.
Was supposed to be 3,000 words, and he went 12,000 words. So that's 9,000 words worth of ad-libbing. So if you think that all of those ad-libs were unifying, were about bringing people together, you are sorely mistaken. And I don't understand why pundits like Van Jones, like Scott Jennings, for instance, are not sick of being embarrassed by saying that Donald Trump has changed. Is this the night that he becomes presidential? There were no actual olive branches when you look at the policies that he was talking about. He was talking to that room and that room only. He was not talking to Nikki Haley's voters. He was not talking to left-leaning independents. These are some of the things that he did that are just standard Donald Trump rally going. Crazy Nancy Pelosi, name-checking Joe Biden. He had said, I am not going to talk about the president. I'm not going to use his name. Talking relentlessly about the migrant invasion and what the migrants are doing in the country.
Well, that's true.
More election.
That's true.
Okay. More election denying. They cheated. We'll never let that happen again. I'm a victim. He had, even in the text, Eileen Cannon was a call out, which is not particularly unifying, saying she did the right thing by tossing the Mar-a-Lago case, which conservatives, even like Jonathan Turley, say is the most serious one. Praising people like Viktor Orban, saying that Kim Jong-un misses him. The Taliban calls him, no, you don't miss it. Guess what, guys?
He's an entertainer.
You know what?
You missed this.
3 of 5 people at this table, I know how you're voting, right? I know Charlie likes Trump, I know you like Trump, and I know you like Trump. But guess what? You guys can't do it alone. You need other people. And what is the obsession with Hannibal Lecter? Can someone explain to me? It's like Reagan and it's not funny. It's so weird. He was a sociopath that ate people's faces.
Everybody knows he's a sociopath.
We know what happened. But if you think, again, that it's unifying.
But we've got a lot
what
of
did he
this.
say about the border that wasn't true?
Right, exactly.
People don't like the classification of it as an invasion. They don't like to hear
Well, they don't like the truth.
That's too bad.
Again, you guys are already sold on the package. You know
Okay.
who isn't? White suburban women who are saying, guess what? I care about my reproductive rights, and I don't want to demean.
And they're calling it.
I have no idea how she does that job. I could not do that job. I have talked about this in the past. If you put me on that set and you sat me next to Jesse Waters, somebody would go down. Like, somebody would be on the ground within, like, before the second commercial break. And I'm not talking I would beat him up. No violence. I would just verbally attack him in such a way, just destroy him, that he would be a cowering puddle on the floor. He would just be begging me, please stop. And I'd be like, you're stupid and you're dumb and your eyebrows look like some sort of caterpillar crawled on your face and just stuck there with your dyed black hair and your stupid smugness, and I can't stand you. I could handle Judge Jeanine. I understand how to navigate somebody like Judge Jeanine. Big personality, old broad, very proud of who she is. Just, I'm Judge Jeanine. I could handle that woman. Could not handle Jesse Waters. A chair would be thrown. I'm kidding. I would not throw a chair, but I might throw a pen like Judge Jeanine. Anyway, so last week, Fox News spent nearly all of its energy fawning over Donald J. Trump, bashing President Biden, and rehashing the failed assassination attempt on the former president and Republican presidential candidate. Fox News hosts pretended that Trump was a new man, filled with humility and introspection after his near-death experience. They ignored the fact that multiple speakers at the convention spread lies about voter fraud or went on hate-filled tirades directed at undocumented immigrants. They boasted about the party's diversity as the cameras panned over a nearly all-white crowd of mostly senior-age delegates. Any ongoing segment would abruptly stop as camera operators would pan to the side of the arena. Each night, the former president decided to walk up the center stairs to the Trump family box with a large bandage over his injured ear. Trump loyalists praised God for the miracle of Trump evading a would-be assassin's bullet as a senior-aged wrestler ripped off his shirt and a white rapper rewrote a 26-year-old hit in his honor. The message was unity throughout the proceedings, with Trump being the center of everything, his name spelled out in giant lights like some sort of musical theater review. The crescendo of this spectacle was a meandering, long-winded and rambling speech that included a plethora of lies, Trump's usual divisive language, and self-aggrandizement. Shows I covered last week: Fox and Friends, The Five, The Ingraham Angle, and all of the RNC coverage, which is approximately 16 hours. It varied from night to night. The PBS RNC coverage, in addition to my usual 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. So I'm exhausted. Okay, so it was crazy, and that speech was awful. That's why I wanted to open with Jessica Tarlov describing it, because if you didn't sit through it, I'm going to reenact for you, my listeners, what was going on over here in my 450 square foot apartment, Casa Jeske. Okay, so the first half hour, I was doing okay. And when he started going off script, I couldn't hold it in, and I would just sit there watching this nonsense and just go, why are you still talking? Why are you still talking? Why are you still, just shut up. Why are you still talking? Why are you still talking? Because he wasn't saying anything. It was just like, our leaders, our founders, they believe in everything about that I love. And by the way, I'm amazing and everybody loves it. Just like, shut up. No one wants to hear anyone talk for 90 minutes. They don't. That's a movie. That's an entire movie. But instead, it's just one idiot talking. Who in their right mind talks for 90 minutes? Who in their right mind? Seriously, nobody wants to hear you talk for 90 minutes. Even in a podcast, I break it up with media clips. Okay. We're going to start with... I'm going to be ranting a lot in this, you can tell. I'm going to be ranting a lot in this, and I'm not holding back. I'm not holding back. Okay, now here we go. Laura Ingraham celebrating the dumbest moments from the RNC. She made a little montage. I will give some grace to the pastor. He just happens to be included in the other stupid clips here. But here you are. Laura Ingraham, someone who claims to be a serious person, who was a Supreme Court Justice clerk, who is very well educated, was a white-collar lawyer, and she's celebrating this.
President Trump is literally putting his life on the line for something bigger than himself. And he's willing to risk it all because he loves this country.
You can't deny the power of God on this man's life. You can't deny that God protected him. You cannot deny that it was a millimeter miracle that was able to save this man's life.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trump-a-mania run wild, brother. Let Trump-a-mania rule again. Let Trump-a-mania make America great again.
Every 70-year-old man watching that is like, how does that guy look so good? All right. Who said politics can't be entertaining and inspiring?
Laura Ingraham, you were a Supreme Court clerk, and you have debased yourself to the point that you are praising someone like Hulk Hogan. Someone like Hulk Hogan. Are you kidding me? And by the way, I could tell you how he got that physique at age 70, and it wasn't by pumping iron naturally. He is most likely taking some sort of horrible substance in order to boost his musculature at that age. It's just not natural to be that buff at 70. It's not. It's not normal. So, oh my goodness. So some folks on social media were pointing out all of the many scandals that those three men, and I will introduce them. The first man in that clip was Dana White, the president of Ultimate Fighting Championship, which is normally just called UFC. Then you also had Pastor Lorenzo Selwell of Detroit, Michigan. And then finally you had the 70-year-old professional wrestler Hulk Hogan. Now, Hulk Hogan 20 years ago was not considered a scandalous person, but I'm going to break this one down, and I had some fun here. Here we go. Hulk Hogan, whose given name is Terry Jean Boyea. I'm just going to call him Hogan to make it a little bit simpler. So Hogan made several racist comments in a sex tape that leaked in 2015 where he was having sex with his then best friend's wife. This was open and condoned, but still a little tacky. He said the N-word several times in reference to his daughter's love life, and he also used a homophobic slur. He also lied about his steroid use for years, claiming falsely that he was completely clean when he used steroids, he's admitted, at least, to in 14 years of his career. When another wrestler, Jesse the Body Ventura, tried to organize a union for wrestlers, Hogan was instrumental in blocking it. Hogan also choked out a comedian named Richard Belzer on live TV in a poorly executed demonstration of a wrestling move. Belzer passed out on his show and ended up suing Hogan for $5 million. The two reached an undisclosed settlement. In a 2018 interview, Hogan admitted to sabotaging the careers of other wrestlers to keep his position as one of the most successful wrestlers in the industry. He cheated on his wife of 24 years with his daughter's best friend. And finally, Hogan promoted conspiracy theories about the COVID-19 vaccine on social media. Apparently now, when he enters rings, at least this used to happen, I don't know if it does, I don't know if people have forgiven him 9 years later, but immediately following the sex tape where he said the N-word a bunch of times, people used to boo him when he would do wrestling matches. So next we have Dana White. Now, Dana White was caught slapping his wife on video. On New Year's Eve in 2022, as it was turning into 2023, White and his wife got into a heated argument outside a nightclub in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. White's wife striked him first, and then White slaps her twice before they walk off camera. White and his wife issued a statement about the incident, and he faced no disciplinary action by the UFC. His mother has written a book, an unauthorized biography of her son, claiming he turned his back on the family. She's called him egotistical, self-centered, arrogant, and cruel. Now, that may not be true. Things get weird when you get famous with family members, but just wanted to include that. Finally, Pastor Lorenzo Selwell, you know, he was a pastor. Half of what he said was perfectly fine. I found his sermon a little lacking. It was a lot about him. And then it was a lot about, like, Trump came to the ghetto, as those are his words, not mine. And he just kept saying that and just thought, is that it? Is that all you've got? Like, are you not going to talk? Like, he didn't say anything about Trump's policies. He just, you know, it's a miracle Trump's not dead. I wasn't impressed. He was involved in a legal battle with a church that attempted to push him out. Members of the church voted to oust Selwell, but he refused to leave. Selwell was handcuffed by police as he was forced to leave the building in an incident he called a church jacking. That's bizarre, completely insane, but that's what happened. I don't quite understand it. I don't know why you'd want to preach at a church where people didn't want you to preach at, but there's a lot more to that story, but a little nutty. And, you know, it's perfectly fine if somebody appears at a sex tape having sex with his best friend's wife, because it was all, like, above board, even though they were taping it without his consent, which was bizarre. Just so many layers to this. Anyway, but the fact that you're, like, supposed to be representing this, you know, righteous party that's all promoting Christianity and, more morality and, oh, you can't have an abortion and you got to stay married and yada, yada, yada. Oh, but this guy is going to speak right before the former president comes out, the wrestler who cheated on his wife, was in a sex tape, said the N-word, did all these horrible things. And then we're going to have a guy who slapped his wife on camera and just kind of, whatever. We were drunk. That was basically what he and his wife said. And then, of course, you have this pastor that has this bizarre issue with, going into a church where they've kicked him out. I don't understand. It's all bizarre. So next up, it gets weirder. This one I was just like, and again, people misunderstood this tweet when I posted it. Some people thought I was like a Ronald Reagan fan. I am not. If you are, that's great. I'm not here to judge you. The 80s were a very different time. I was a child. During the 1980s, my father used to famously throw things at the television set when Ronald Reagan came on because my father was a union man. Okay, but still, I was appalled at this. This is Laura Ingraham comparing Donald J. Trump to Ronald Reagan.
I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Donald Trump is the true heir to Ronald Reagan. Now, mark my words, as someone who was a young Reaganite who worked for President Reagan, history will remember Trump in a similar way. It's not exactly identical, but the way that history remembers Reagan. And of course, it's not just the assassination attempt, but the way Reagan changed the Republican Party and the way Trump is changing the Republican Party.
All right, Ronald Reagan, radically, with the help of the Heritage Foundation, that's a whole other story, but the Heritage Foundation basically gave him a whole blueprint, much like Project 2025, and said, here's how you're going to change the government, Ronald Reagan. And oh, by the way, hire all of these people. And Ronald Reagan was like, this is amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate all your help. Let me print that blueprint that you gave me, and I'm going to pass it out to everybody I know. Let's do this. And that's what happened with Ronald Reagan. He did radically change the Republican Party and the platform of the Republican Party, and I would say this country in many ways. We're still living with the repercussions of the Reagan years. Now, you may be a huge fan of Reagan, you may not be. I'm not here to tell you how to think, but I will say, I don't think that Reagan was motivated by his own ego to be like, I'm beloved by everyone, I'm Ronald Reagan. I think he was a true believer in his policies. I didn't happen to agree with them, most of them, almost all of them really, but I don't think his motivation was, I want to stay out of prison and I am amazing and need to be adored constantly. I do think that is Trump's motivation, which is very, very different. Also, let's remember, would Ronald Reagan sit in the White House dining room as a mob of his supporters attacked the Capitol, beating cops and screaming, hang your vice president? Absolutely not. Would Ronald Reagan be like, hey, Vladimir Putin, go ahead and take Ukraine. Who needs it? Love ya. Love my dictators. Woo, go Viktor Orban. You're a dictator too. Have fun. You guys are amazing. Absolutely not. Now, Reagan did love dictators in some cases in South America. I mean, complicated because he hated communism. Again, not a fan of Reagan. Please do not construe this. But I do not think for a moment that Reagan would have acted like Trump did on January 6th, nor would he rant about getting electrified by sharks. He wouldn't whine about water pressure. He wouldn't constantly say, poor me. In fact, I don't think, and I'm getting worked up here, Ronald Reagan ever said, poor me. And I grew up during the Reagan Revolution with two parents who hated him. I didn't like him. I could go on and on and on about that. But no, he was a man of dignity. He lied, sure. He did shady stuff, of course. But he didn't just go, poor me, poor me, poor me, 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 me. He wasn't a narcissist. Okay, I feel like I need George Conway on the show with me right now. But anyway, because George Conway and I are of one mind, weirdly, about Donald J. Trump. You would think a hardcore former conservative who is married to Kellyanne Conway and I would share anything in common, but we do on Donald J. Trump. We do on Donald J. Trump. Anyway. Next up. They tried to kill Trump. Who is they? Here we go.
Look, the bottom line is this. First, they tried to censor and silence President Trump. Then they tried to indict and impeach President Trump. Now they tried to kill President Trump.
I've done everything to try and strip him of his wealth and of his fame. They've tried to break up our family. They've done everything possible to try and get him and kill him. And they literally tried to kill him this week.
Now, that first voice that you heard was Representative Cory Mills, a Republican from Florida, and then the second voice was Eric Trump, the second son of Donald J. Trump. Now, in both cases, and we heard a lot of this language right after the assassination attempt, which was a tragedy. Nobody wants an assassination attempt. I cannot stress that enough. Absolutely awful. Just awful for the country, awful for everything. However, when they're using terms like they tried to kill Trump, and they're including it with all of his legal problems and the criticism towards him, I just go, wait a second. Wait a second. This is who tried to kill Donald Trump. It was a 20-year-old named Thomas Matthew Crooks, who was a gun enthusiast, who was bullied in school. He donated $15 to a liberal campaign group, Act Blue, in 2021 before registering as a Republican. That is the order. Please, people keep getting that confused. He registered as a Republican after giving a $15. Who knows why he gave that $15 contribution? So he registered as a Republican. His father is registered as a libertarian. His mother is registered as a Democrat. A neighbor told a reporter with WTAE, the local ABC affiliate, that he saw Trump campaign signs on the Crooks' lawn as recently as a few months ago. At this point in the investigation, officials do not have a solid motive for Crooks. There's no evidence yet that he was working with anyone or part of any conspiracy. So we just have a young man who is troubled, who loved guns, and I'm going to stress that one. He had very easy access to high-powered weapons, decided to go out in a blaze of glory. I don't know. I don't know what he was thinking. We'll probably never know. The person who shot Ronald Reagan was trying to impress Jodie Foster. These things often don't make any sense. So stop saying they tried to kill Trump. He tried to kill Trump, and he's not one of us. So please, that's just ridiculous. So at this point, we're about midway through. This is the ranting podcast. It's funny because I'm not intending to do that. Last week was intense. Having to sit through all that was intense. So anyway, I should give out a shout out to my sponsor right now. I've entered the best sellers category. I don't know what that means, over at Substack, which is whatever. Thank you. But Decoding Fox News gets 100% of its funding from listeners to this podcast and readers of my newsletter. And what that means is I have no large donor. I have no billionaire giving me money. I have no puppet strings. I'm free to do what I want. I am anti-corporate media. If you would like to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, it's $5 a month, which is the lowest rate that Substack allows me to do. You can also become a Patreon supporter. To do so, you can go to my Substack at Decoding Fox News, my Patreon at Decoding Fox News. If you can't afford to become a paid subscriber or paid supporter, share the newsletter, share the podcast. That also helps build the audience, get the word out. And that's about it. Give me a good review on whatever platform you're using. And that's about it. Okay, moving on. We're going on to these clips this week. I'm telling you, I was like, I have too many of them, and they're all good. Here we go. This one was just money. This one was money. Greg Gutfeld, how dare you call someone Hitler? I call people Hitler. Here we go. This first clip is from Monday on The 5. Greg Gutfeld reacting to the attempted assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump.
You don't call somebody Hitler in the hopes that they don't get killed. Right? You don't demonize somebody hoping that they get flowers sent to them. You do this because you have a desire to win it at all costs. And now you've seen what happens. And now you have people saying, you know what, maybe we should dial it back a bit. I think it was on The View. They said we need to lower the temperature. And they are nothing more than arsonists who aren't aware of the actual work they've done. They've raised the temperature every day. A threat to democracy, a threat to democracy. I don't know what's worse, believing that Trump was a threat to democracy or saying he was and knowing you were lying and not understanding what you did.
Ladies and gentlemen, 3 days later, same show, same person. Here's Greg Gutfeld.
I have no sympathy for anybody. You know, I'm so happy I get to use the Hitler analogy in reverse. This last chapter in Biden's career recalls the final days of Hitler in that movie Downfall. I don't know if you remember, we now come full circle. You know, it's no longer Hitler as a threat, but a feeble retreat into isolation where he refuses to admit he is lost, and the generals begin to bail on him. That's where we are.
So yes, you heard that correctly. In the span of 3 days, Greg Gutfeld said, nobody should be calling anybody Hitler. When you call somebody Hitler, you demonize them, and then bad things happen, basically. And then 3 days later, he's like, Joe Biden is Hitler. What are you doing? Like, how am I not supposed to clip that and put that on Twitter? Come on. Now, what happened to me last week, because I put most of my focus on the RNC. And to be completely honest, I was still backed up from the assassination attempt. So I was like 2 days behind everybody else, 2 days behind. And I would watch like 8 hours of RNC coverage, starting with PBS, moving to Fox. And then Fox did it in a very strange way, and that they started at 10 o'clock. They did an hour, then took time off for Gutfeld, bizarrely, and then came back and did, it was kind of an uneven amount of time, but it was usually about 4 hours per night. And they would sometimes cut to speeches. They would sometimes not. Basically how Fox covered the RNC. And I didn't know how they were going to do it. If I were to do it again, I'd probably change how I covered things last week. Is they used their primetime shows to showcase the RNC. So they had these boxes in the arena, and they would just, you know, interview people in the box, and then they would cut to the floor. And then they would interview people in the box, and they'd cut to the floor. And that's how they covered it. And the stuff that I was picking up, which was technically the official RNC coverage on Fox, were people in a studio in LA, weirdly, talking about the RNC. So it was strange, but I got some good coverage. This clip is exactly why I did this weird late night coverage, because it was the official RNC coverage. They do odd things, and I knew nobody else was going to pick this up. And they had, on Monday, a man that they've had on special nights, like election nights, any time that there's like a big event, they'll do like a special, and they invite John Boosie on. And John Boosie is an associate editor at the Wall Street Journal. And it's a shame that they only have him on at like 2 o'clock in the morning, but they at least have him on air. Now, this is his comment when he was asked about a statement that Joe Biden made in a call to donors, where Joe Biden used the term, we've got to put a bullseye on Trump. And he meant focus. And I actually did a video on this. Bullseye has 2 different meanings. And one of them is basically to just get perfect, hit it with exactness. And it's not physically meaning you hit anything. It's a figure of speech. So here's John Boosie trying to defend that. And then he turns it on this woman, Molly, who is interviewing him, and points out all of the horrible things that Donald J. Trump has said.
Right. Well, it's a colloquialism, right? On the other hand, it is a very sort of difficult time in American politics, and you want to be really careful about the words that you choose, particularly in a country with as many guns and weapons that are out there, and in a election and in a campaign that already has a certain amount of sort of political rhetoric at the high end, and violent rhetoric. But look, you know, it's not Biden that's being called out for a political rhetoric that does have this violent tinge to it. 72% of voters in an NBC poll in 2022 said that President Trump, former President Trump, bore some or a lot of responsibility for the increase in threats and political violence in the country because of his rhetoric. And And I think, Molly, that we've all heard of it. I went through the clips for the Wall Street Journal and Washington Post and Reuters, for this session. And it's a long list of instances where the president has said there's going to be riots in the street if I'm not nominated in 2016, potential death and destruction. He calls his opponents vermin. It's kind of a page out of 1930s Germany. Says that migrants are poisoning the blood of Americans. Again, this kind of racial overtone. Says that this is a final battle, that we need to demolish the deep state. He calls judges in his criminal cases thugs. He says that former head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a guy that he appointed, General Milley, should be executed. And it goes on and on.
What was so great about that, watching it as it happened, is he was not using any notes. He was able to rattle that off without looking at anything because he was looking right at the camera the whole time. And it's because he just recently written a piece about Trump's rhetoric. So this idea that, because we get so much from Trump, it's sometimes difficult to pinpoint the exact comments. You just say, oh, he says crazy stuff. But, Boosie was able to just go bam, 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 bam. And that's just wonderful. It was just great. I'm like, God, why don't they have you on at normal hours? Anyway, so moving on, we have the next one is this one. It surprised the heck out of me. It took me about an hour to make the clip you're about to hear. What I have learned to do now is whenever they have a voter panel, I used to just write down in my notes, voter panel. And now I've learned, no, you can't do that. You have to write down every name. And the reason why you have to write down every name is that Fox News reuses these guests like crazy. They also take political operatives and try to present them as just, we just found this person on the street. And then you look them up and they're like, they work for the Trump campaign. Like stuff like that crazy. Like they had one, I'm not going to play it right now, but they had one clip last week where they had 3 Gen Z voters, and I Googled all of their names, and one of them worked for a group that's associated with Project 2025, and 2 others were like the president of their local chapter of the Young Republicans for their college. So these are not everyday voters. But this woman really cracked me up. So she was the first person introduced in the segment, and this was a voter segment from Wisconsin. Fox and Friends, because of its early hours on Friday, remained in Milwaukee. They didn't go back to New York like the primetime shows did. They remained in Milwaukee, and they just shot their show in Milwaukee because I guess they couldn't make it back in time. So they had this little panel on, and this first woman's name is Caitlin Singleton. And so I typed Caitlin Singleton Fox, and boom, I found so many hits. So I went ahead and put them together in a slight arch. Put the dates very big in the front so you could see exactly, like in bright yellow letters, each appearance when she appeared. And then stuck this, 2-minute clip on Twitter, and I think it hit about 2 million views. So it went crazy viral. So I'm going to break this down as best I can. Here is the first clip. This is Lawrence Jones interviewing a panel of 3, quote-unquote, undecided voters.
Did the GOP message reach critical undecided voters? That's the big question. Let's bring in 3 independents here in Wisconsin, Caitlin, Mary, and Rick, undecided voters. Let's go to you, Caitlin. What did you think about the speech? And did it change your mind?
Yeah, I think the speech in general, and even Eric's speech, the message of unity, laying out what we had under former President Trump, what we currently have, and what we can expect in the future, it did push me forward.
So that clip was from July 19th, 2024. We're going to move on to the next one, April 30th, 2023. And Rachel Campos Duffy is going to introduce her again.
Joining us now, a panel of moms, Tina Aviles and Caitlin Singleton. Tina, Caitlin, welcome. Let's start with you, Tina.
That was a segment about the economy. Moving on to September 1st, 2023, Brian Kilmeade is going to introduce her, and this is another segment about the economy.
We're now joined by our panel of everyday but extraordinary Americans. Jasmine Derringer, she works 2 jobs and is a single mom. Caitlin Singleton is a mother of 3, nonprofit housing site manager, and
next clip is June 12th, 2022. Rachel Campos Duffy, this is a segment about inflation.
Tanisha Williams is a realtor with 4 kids. Caitlin Singleton is a rental housing site manager with 3 kids. And Carolina Del Calvo is a mother of 2 and a business owner.
Next clip, October 10th, 2021. Again, Rachel Campos Duffy introducing Singleton as now a working mom.
Our next guests are 2 working moms. Carissa Mayer is a nurse and a mother of 3. Caitlin Singleton is a rental housing site manager with 3 kids as well.
Moving on to October 15th, 2020. This time it's Martha McCallum introducing Singleton as in a panel of 3 undecided voters. So we're going back to undecided voters again.
3 undecided voters from crucial battleground states. We have Christopher Formoso of Florida, financial analysis manager who voted for Gary Johnson back in 2016 as a registered Republican. Caitlin Singleton, Democrat from Wisconsin, is a rental housing site manager, mom of 3. She voted for Hillary Clinton last time around.
So that was October 15th, 2020. And then the night before the election, they had her on again to discuss being an undecided voter. I mean, she was just on 2 weeks before. But here is Caitlin Singleton yet again.
Ainsley, thanks so much. And that's right. I am here with Caitlin Singleton from Wisconsin, who voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, Doug Boyer from Ohio, who wrote in former Governor John Kasich last election, and Nick Golick from North Carolina, who supported Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson.
So yes, that was a lot of appearances for one person on Fox News. It didn't really make a ton of sense, now did it? I guess based on that timeline, I kind of flipped 2 of them. Her first appearance, from what I could gather, was October 15th. 2020, and then she appeared again in November 2nd, 2020, and then she just kept coming back. So that's 4 years, 7 appearances, 1 person who's supposed to be an everyday American. Completely nutty. I also wanted to point out that in those clips, Doug Boyer appeared. Now, I counted 4 times that Doug Boyer appeared as an independent voter from last year, 2023. And I know because I remember him. He's very charismatic. He sticks out. And then there's another woman named Tanisha Williams, who in those 7 clips, she showed up twice. So I could just go down any number of rabbit holes. I could create a very similar clip like that of Douglas Boyer and of Tanisha Williams, I bet money. So next up, because we're kind of running out of time, this is the PBS NewsHour, and I just wrote, is not kidding around. Now, if you want to watch good RNC coverage, watch the PBS NewsHour, because they're not corporate media. They don't have to do that corporate media stuff that corporate media does, where they're so desperate for ratings, they kind of hype things up that they probably shouldn't hype up, the whole 9 yards. PBS doesn't care about ratings. PBS gets ratings. PBS gets donations. PBS gets grant money. PBS just goes straight for the throat. And this is such a great moment. I love how they do this too, like super professional, but they just don't hold back. Here we go. This is from Wednesday, the 3rd night of the RNC.
Claim that Democrats are rigging the presidential election, specifically about non-citizens voting.
How did we get here? It happened because Democrats cynically decided they wanted votes from illegals more than they wanted to protect our children.
Just last week, Ruben Gallego voted to let the millions of people who poured into our country illegally cast a ballot in this upcoming election.
That claim is just one of many conspiracy theories about the security of America's election system that are being spread in the lead up to November. Our White House correspondent Laura Barone Lopez has been covering this, and she joins us now. Laura, we should point out this claim isn't new, but it is now frequently repeated by Republicans. Where did it come from in the first place?
This lie dates back to 2016, Amna, when then candidate Donald Trump said that he lost the popular vote because 3 to 5 million non-citizen immigrants voted for Hillary Clinton. That's, of course, is not true. But now it's become much more pervasive among Republicans this election cycle, going all the way from Republican nominee Donald Trump to House Speaker Mike Johnson, who has repeated this baseless claim over and over again. And the House Republicans just last week passed a bill that makes it illegal for non-citizens to vote, requiring proof of citizenship. It's important to note, Amna, that it is already illegal for non-citizens to vote under federal law.
So in my humble opinion, that is what we need more of in the media in general, is just call them out for their lies, say it directly, say it straight, don't sugarcoat it, be specific, nailed it. Okay. Next up, we have stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I compare the hours I've covered on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. Fox News often ignores major stories. The following list are stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not. So starting with climate disasters, which Fox never reports on these unless it is in the United States, and they tend to report more on them if it's in a red state. Here we go. So far this year, 2024 is the hottest year on record. Every month since June 2023 has ranked as the planet's hottest month since records began, compared with the corresponding month in previous years. This is according to the European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service. Next, updates to the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that he wants Russia to attend another peace summit planned for November. Russia and Ukraine both exchanged 95 prisoners of war 3 weeks after their last swap. Zelensky said in a post on Telegram messaging service that the United Arab Emirates had brokered the agreements. Zelensky also met with the UK's new government to ask for permission to strike deeper into Russia to help stop deadly missile attacks into Ukraine. Moving on to updates in the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli airstrikes killed more than 60 Palestinians in central Gaza, including in an area that was designated a safe zone that was crowded with thousands of people. Israeli authorities released 13 detained Palestinians while ceasefire talks remain ongoing between Israel and Hamas. Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 5 Syrians, including 3 children. According to a new report by Human Rights Watch, Hamas's military wing, the Qassam Brigades, and at least 4 other Palestinian armed groups committed numerous war crimes and crimes against humanity against civilians during the October 7, 2023 assault on southern Israel. The 236-page report, titled, "I Can't Erase All the Blood from My Mind, Palestinian Armed Groups' October 7th Assault on Israel," documents several dozen cases of serious violations of international humanitarian law by Palestinian armed groups at nearly all the civilian attack sites on October 7th. Moving on to the rest of the news, Gambia's parliament has voted to uphold a landmark law that bans female genital mutilation, also known as FGM, in the largely Muslim nation, after religious groups pushed for the legislation to be repealed. CenterPoint Energy, a Houston-based utility company, has been hit with 3 lawsuits, including a pair of class action petitions seeking more than $100 million apiece in response to prolonged power outages associated with the storm, as a fallen power line that caused life-changing injuries to a Houston man. And that storm would have been the last hurricane. Russian-American journalist Masha Gessen was convicted in absentia and sentenced to 8 years in prison by a Moscow court for criticizing the Russian military. Gessen lives in the United States as a staff writer for The New Yorker and a columnist for The New York Times. She also used to teach, I don't know if she still does, at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY, where I went. Carlos Watson, founder and former CEO of Ozy Media, was convicted by a federal jury in Brooklyn of conspiracy to commit securities fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft in connection with a years-long scheme to defraud investors in and lenders of Ozy in tens of millions of dollars. Sue Mi Terry, a former CIA agent and White House employee, was criminally indicted for acting as an agent of South Korea. According to the indictment, Terry provided South Korean intelligence officers with access, information, and advocacy. The American country singer Ingrid Andress apologized for a disastrous performance of the national anthem at a Major League Baseball game. Andress said she was drunk before the performance and would be checking into a rehab facility to seek help for substance abuse. Last week marked the 10-year anniversary of the shooting down of the Malaysia flight MH17 that took the lives of 298 passengers and crew. An international investigation concluded that a Buk missile system that destroyed the MH17 belonged to the Russian 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade and was fired from territory controlled by a pro-Moscow separatist. Russia has repeatedly denied any responsibility for the attack. PBS produced a segment that fact-checked several speakers at the Republican convention who repeated falsehoods that Democrats are rigging the election and that non-citizens will vote in November. So they did an actual segment on it in addition to the clip that I played for you. The mayor of Paris swam in the Seine River to show that it is clean for the 2024 Summer Olympics. Since 2015, organizers have invested $1.5 billion to prepare the Seine for the Olympics and to ensure Parisians have a cleaner river after the Games. The Department of Justice accused employees of the country's largest housing provider for migrants of sexual harassment of children and abuse. Southwest Key Programs, Inc. employees, including supervisors, raped, touched, or solicited sex and nude images of children beginning in 2015 and possibly earlier. The UN top court, the International Court of Justice, ruled that Israel is violating international law over Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. The ICJ said Israel should cease all new settlement activities and evacuate settlers from Palestinian territories. Ex-Trump CFO Alan Weisselberg was released early from Rikers jail for good behavior after pleading guilty to perjury early this year in connection with New York Attorney General's Letitia James' fraud lawsuit against Trump. Police issued a shoot-on-sight orders amid a national curfew in Bangladesh during a rash of student-led protests that have resulted in the death of 100 people. The demonstrations, called for mainly by student groups, started weeks ago to protest a quota system that reserves up to 30% of government jobs for relatives of veterans who fought in Bangladesh's War of Independence in 1971. Bernice Johnson Rogan, a musician and scholar who used her rich contralto voice in the service of the American Civil Rights Movement and human rights struggles around the world, died at the age of 81. Bob Newhart, a legendary comedian, has died at the age of 94. He rose to fame with his comedy album in the 1960s, The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart. The Bob Newhart Show debuted on television in 1972 and ran for 6 years, to be followed by another television hit, Newhart, that ran for 8 seasons. The actor and comedian was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame in 1993 and had his material added to the collection of the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. He won the Kennedy Center's 2002 Mark Twain Prize for American Humor. So that's a lot, and it's a shame that they didn't mention Bob Newhart. You'd think they would have, because who didn't love Bob Newhart? Anyway, there's a lot of stories, but that one I was like, really? You didn't even bother with like a 30-second plug for the death of Bob Newhart? That's shame on you, Fox. Anyway, so by the numbers, I compare the top 5 topics from Fox to the top 5 topics of PBS. Starting with Fox. At 26%, Trump's assassination attempt. 25%, just blatant shilling for Trump, so I call that Trump 2024. 17%, and this was alarmingly high. I was shocked at how much they included of just bashing Biden throughout. They just used every opportunity to bash Biden in between promoting Trump and promoting Republicans in general. 11% was the RNC. So that's how slanted this was. They spent 17% bashing Biden and only 11% just purely on the RNC. And then 9% was spent on J.D. Vance being the vice presidential pick. PBS NewsHour, top 5 topics for the week ending July 21st, 2024. 19% RNC, makes more sense. 10% J.D. Vance as vice president pick. 9% Biden's future as a candidate for president, 6% Trump assassination attempt, and 4% Israel-Hamas war, which is still very much ongoing. Terrible, horrible situation. It should be covered. Fox ignores it. Next up, we have words used on Fox for the week ending July 21st, 2024. Trump with a staggering. Now, this was only, I want to just preface this. This was only the 15 hours. I didn't do transcripts of RNC coverage for PBS or Fox because they kept jumping back to actual speeches. They were on at different times. It just was a weird thing to cover. I wouldn't have gotten a very accurate read if I'd pulled that footage because so much of it was speeches. It just wouldn't have made any sense. So this is just based on Fox and Friends of the Five and the Ingraham angle. Just 15 hours. Here we go. Trump, 876. That is extremely high for 15 hours. Biden, 410. Secret Service, 183. Assassination, 75. Border, 66. Kamala, 56. That number is definitely going to go up. Reagan, 56. Economy, 25. Crime, 20. Inflation, 14. Populist or populism, 7. Israel, only 6 times. Shame on them. China, 5. AOC, as in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 5. Hunter, as in Hunter Biden, 5. And Hillary, as in Hillary Clinton, 4. And that's the podcast. I'm looking forward to next week's podcast because they're giving me so many great clips with the freakouts over Kamala Harris being the new presidential candidate for the Democrats. I want to give a quick shout out because I found out that somebody I used to work with at Webster Hall, his mother is a huge fan of the show. And this was a young man named Wiley. And very quickly, I was a stage manager. Wiley was my youngest person in my crew. And I gave everybody a cat photo on my phone so I could identify them instantly when they popped up. And Wiley got a kitten. He knew this. He knew this. Wiley was my kitten that would pop up because he was so much younger than everybody else. He was a wonderful employee. I loved working with him. He's just utmost professional. Want to give a shout out to Wiley's mom. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you can go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, my Patreon, Decoding Fox News. You can find my work at Twitter, also known as X, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Facebook, YouTube. That's a lot. I'm exhausted. Next week's going to be a wild ride. I have a feeling. I will see you at the next podcast. Also, you can check out a version of this podcast at the Resolute Square YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening.
Resolute Square.